The origins of what would become the Mafia universe begin long before the rise of modern organized crime, with the founding of Porto Romano in 1547 by the Italian explorer Giulio Contadino. He named this small trading post after his home city of Rome, unaware that this place would one day grow into a major metropolis. Over time it changed hands, becoming a Dutch possession in the 17th century. By 1694, under its first English governor Sir John Stanmore, the settlement was renamed Empire Bay, marking the start of its identity as a city of opportunity, migration, commerce, corruption, and crime. The centuries that followed saw Empire Bay's growth as waves of immigrants arrived, seeking fortune, but often finding hardship, and sometimes evil turning profit off the margins of society. In 1718 New Bordeaux was established, another city that would assume significance centuries later in Mafia lore. The American Revolutionary War ended in 1783, granting independence to the United States, and Britain, during that war, had used Empire Bay's prison ships to hold thousands of American prisoners of war. Conditions were so bad that more died from disease aboard those ships than in the battles themselves. With the formation and growth of America, and with waves of European immigrants, criminal organizations began quietly to operate, using the gaps in law, opportunity, poverty, and social divides to build power. As the 19th century advanced, families like the O'Neills settled in Empire Bay, businesses like Humphrey Whiskey and Old Empirical Beer were founded, and communities took root, but so did organized crime, operating both subtly in legitimate business and overtly in corruption, illicit trades, protections, gambling, and vice. The 20th century saw these seeds bloom into full-scale criminal empires. By the early 1900s, many key characters in the Mafia universe are being born. Tommy Angelo is born in 1900 in San Celeste, Sicily. Salvo Palmieri is born in 1901, Carlo Falcone and Pepe Costa in 1905, Luca Guarino in 1906, Eddie Scarpa in 1908, Leo Galante and Frank Vinci arrive in Empire Bay around 1908, Sal Marcano is born in 1912, Vito Scaletta arrives in Empire Bay at age 7, sometime around 1922 to 1923. The Moretti crime family begins operations in Empire Bay in that same period. The world is changing. Prohibition comes in during the 1920s, giving rise to smuggling, bootlegging, speakeasies, illicit networks of supply and demand. These years provide fertile ground for criminal families to grow, using illegal alcohol as cash flow, corruption, and violence to secure territories and influence. In 1930 the first Mafia game begins. Tommy Angelo encounters Paulie Lombardo and Sam Trapani, saving them from a Morello gang ambush. Shortly after, Tommy is inducted into the Salieri crime family. The Salieris are in conflict with the Morello crime family. Tommy participates in sabotage to win the Lost Heaven Grand Prix, and shortly later Prohibition ends. The conflict between Salieri and Morello, the Vinci-Moretti War, rages. Empire Bay becomes a city of betrayals, vendettas, alliances. Tommy is caught in the crossfire, forced to do things he never imagined. Eventually he must betray one family for another, navigate law enforcement, violence, loyalty, guilt. By the end of Mafia, the first game, Tommy Angelo's journey has led him to a point where he becomes a target. He cannot stay innocent. Tommy survives but at cost to himself, emotionally and morally. The canonical ending leads into Mafia 2, the betrayal and fallout set the stage. After World War II, Mafia 2 picks up. Vito Scaletta returns home to Empire Bay, after having fought in the war, wounded, having seen horrors, driven by dreams of prosperity, wanting a better life for his family, but burdened by debts and connections. Together with his friend Joe Barbaro, Vito becomes embroiled in Empire Bay's criminal underworld. He does small crimes, moves up into bigger conspiracies, works with corrupt cops and crooked businessmen. He serves time, gets out, then becomes more deeply involved. Drug runs, rackets, smuggling, violence, murders. He earns respect, enemies. The Falcone crime family, the Moretti, the Clementi, the Salieri, they form alliances, rivalries. There are betrayals, family versus family, friend versus friend. Joe Barbaro is betrayed in certain missions, Vito is torn between loyalty and survival. Major events include a large explosion in the Empire Arms Hotel where many of Clementi's leadership are killed, though the head of that family survives. There is war between the triads, Clementi's, Salieri's, and Empire Bay's established powers. By 1951–1952 Vito and Joe become made men in the Falcone family. Vito buys a home in Greenfield, Villa Scaletta. They eliminate much of Clementi's power. But there is no peace. Henry Tomasino becomes an informant and is killed. The triads exact revenge. Vito loses everything when his house is burned. He faces betrayals, danger, going into exile. With the help of Leo Galante, a veteran consigliere, Vito is exiled to New Bordeaux. Joe Barbaro joins the Vinci family, rising inside. The business of crime continues, shifting into the 50s. As the decades pass, law enforcement becomes more aggressive, public awareness increases. Organized crime is no longer just hidden corruption, it becomes national headlines, subject to investigations, legal pressure, internal splits. Then comes Mafia 3. Set in 1968 in New Bordeaux, a city modeled after New Orleans, we meet Lincoln Clay, a mixed-race orphan, abandoned by his mother and growing up without stable family ties, raised partly in an orphanage. After serving in Vietnam, Lincoln returns home, disillusioned, haunted, stronger, determined. When he comes back, he is betrayed. His surrogate family, the Black Mob, his friends, people he trusted, were slaughtered by Sal Marcano, brutal and calculating. Lincoln is shot and left for dead, his friends killed, his bar burned down. Father James pulls him from the charred remains of his bar in the flames. Lincoln survives, scarred, angry, and he vows vengeance. Lino Cien begins to assemble his new family, recruiting underbosses such as Vito Scaletta, who by now has a long history, and others, gathering allies, mentors, weapons, contacts, and resources. He uses his knowledge of war to organize, plan, and strike at Marcano's empire. He pulls off heists, takes over territories, removes Marcano's lieutenants piece by piece. Along the way he uncovers corruption, complicity of police, betrayal by those who seemed friends. He must navigate a city divided by race, politics, power, entrenched wealth. His war becomes not just personal revenge, but a fight against a system that allows people like Marcano to thrive. In 1968 Lincoln takes bold moves. He robs the New Bordeaux Federal Reserve. He orchestrates symbolic destruction, he recruits Vasari-like figures, he plans to dismantle the Marcano family. In doing so he kills key figures, rescues or avenges the deaths of others, sometimes at great personal cost. The deeper he goes, the more morally ambiguous his choices become. He must decide which compromises to accept, who to trust, who to sacrifice. The war intensifies, business fronts, gang wars, police corruption all entwined. In the process, Lincoln becomes powerful, but also increasingly alone, haunted by what must be done to achieve justice, or vengeance. By the end, he faces Marcano directly, he destroys much of Marcano's operation, reveals betrayal, confronts the costs. After consolidating his power, Lincoln must deal with the aftermath. What remains of his enemies, what becomes of his allies, what remains of his sense of self. The terror and violence leave scars. Laws change, the public becomes aware of corruption, whispers of reform emerge. As years progress, the trajectories of characters extend beyond 1968, deaths, disappearances, legacy. Some characters fade into myth, others are caught by law enforcement or settle old grudges. Documentaries are later made, stories are told, people reflect on the cost of revenge and the cost of being part of the Mafia world. Through all this, the timeline from the founding of Porto Romano in 1547, through Empire Bay's transformation, through the rise of the Salieri, Morello, Falcone, Clementi, Vinci crime families, the role of immigrant roots, war, prohibition, corruption, betrayal, tragedy, ambition, loyalty, revenge, illuminates not only the personal stories of Tommy Angelo, Vito Scaletta, Joe Barbaro, Lincoln Clay, and many others, but also the structural forces, migration, poverty, opportunity, racism, law enforcement and its limitations, the lure of power, the weight of loyalty, the corrosion of morality. The Mafia universe does not offer clean heroes. Tommy Angelo is complicit, Vito Scaletta is sometimes loyal, sometimes ruthless, Lincoln Clay is driven by vengeance but forced into morally gray zones. Characters die, unexpectedly, brutally. Betrayals happen not as twists, but as inevitabilities, given that power and secrets always conflict. The cities change. Empire Bay, New Bordeaux, Lost Heaven, each with its own culture, architecture, atmosphere, but always a reflection of America's underbelly at different times. By 1980s and 1990s the long-term effects are felt. Criminal enterprises that started with rum runners and bootleggers become large corrupt conglomerates, with legal front businesses, politicians in pockets, police in coffers. Some patriarchs are brought to justice, some fall in internal conflict. The Mafia's myth grows around generations, around infamous acts, but also around what justice could do, crackdowns, trials, revelations. Then finally into the 21st century, the world has changed, but the legacy of those who came before remains. Survivors reflect, survivors are few, those who lived carry guilt, loss, shattered relationships. The stories of Tommy Angelo, the Salieri family, of Vito and Joe, of Lincoln Clay, are remembered as legends, warnings. The timeline worlds intersect. Stories from the old country, from Sicily, from Italy, the immigrant experiences, the forced assimilation, the broken dreams, the blood. In the end, the complete story is not simply about crime. It is about human choices made in extremes. It is about what people will do for family, for power, for survival. It is about loyalty, betrayal, survival, and regret. It is about how empires built on fear and shadows cast long shadows, how one man's rise is another man's ruin, how privilege and poverty dance together, how violence begets violence, how revenge may satisfy, but often demands its own toll. And through ages, from 1547 to 1968 to beyond, the Mafia saga reminds us that darkness is part of our stories, but that even in darkness people reach for something more: redemption, peace, remembrance. The end depends not on victory, but on what survives.